All right, welcome back, everybody. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Matthew Deans, who joins us from NASA Glenn Research Center. He is the NASA SBIRSTTR Program post-Phase 2 Workstream lead, and in that role, oversees various award vehicles to promote the transition, acceleration, infusion, and commercialization of technologies developed under the SBIRSTTR program. He holds an aerospace engineering degree from Case Western Reserve University, and with a background in propulsion systems, and has been with NASA as a civil servant for over 10 years. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Deans. We're thrilled to have you here. Over to you.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to speak to everyone. I've been listening in the background all day long. I found it very interesting myself, and I have to say I hear all the challenges. I know NASA, we recognize many of these challenges, but I know there's a group within NASA who gets around the busy air traffic and gets around all these noise concerns by just flying their helicopters on Mars. So just a brief joke. I know it's late in the day. If that was groan worthy, I apologize. But if you're not familiar with the Mars Ingenuity helicopter, it's been successfully having a couple tests, although I heard one of them might not have gone so well, I believe. I just saw the news. I checked to see. But I am more than happy to be here today and speak. I will be broadly talking about the NASA SBIR and STTR program here today. I will definitely focus in on some more of the aeronautics elements as well, but I'll talk about things more broadly and talk about some cross-cutting things we have as well. So with that, I will bring up my charts, which should be showing shortly. Alrighty, here we go. I'll give one more second to go through. So as Matt mentioned, I'm Dr. Matt Deans. Matt's fine. I run the post-phase 2 work stream here within the SBIR program, but I'm going to cover the whole program, and I'm going to cover some different focuses from entry through our transitions. I'm located right here in Ohio, in Cleveland, at the NASA Glenn Research Center. Before I took this specific role in PMO, I also oversaw Glenn's portfolio of all of our technologies. So I'm happy to discuss some of those things. So just as a brief overview of our program, I won't read everything in detail, but really our program is here to leverage small business knowledge and technologies for maximum impact and contribution, and to contribute to NASA's missions, provide societal benefit, and grow the U.S. economy. And I know many of the things we're talking about here today are what we see as things that will benefit society and also effectively be new entries into the economy themselves and change how we do things within the nation. And broadly with NASA's missions, and I'll talk more about it, Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate rather, is designed for that as well. So I'll briefly talk about our SBIR STTR program opportunities. I know we've already heard from some of the other folks from the other government agencies about the SBIR program, but I'll go into a little specifics about NASA's phases. So similar to other agencies, phase 1 and phase 2. Currently, we have our phase 1s at 125K award value and our phase 2s at 750K. I will say that these are both typically done as contracts. So for people who are new to government contracts, that's a nice entry point to learn about how they're done. I know some other agencies do grants and other authorities, but we do ours as contracts. Our phase 1s are 125K, as I mentioned. Our SBIR efforts are 6 months. Our STTR efforts, where small businesses partner with research institutions, are 13 months, a bit longer because we recognize the time challenge and durations of university life cycles. But phase 2s for both are both 24 months. I'll give a momentary plug to I-Corps here. So I-Corps is a program that the NSF runs that NASA's also now joined that helps firms learn about being more entrepreneurial, engaging with customers to help those technologies transition as well. So please go to sbir.nasa.gov to learn more about I-Corps as well for those of you who are interested. And then beyond our phase 2 award vessels are various transitional opportunities and past it. So a brief overview on phase 3s who don't know. So phase 3 is not SBIR STTR program funding. Phase 3 is effectively rights and contract types where government agencies can issue effective sole sources to continue the work, products, etc. from our phase 1s and phase 2s. And I also want to dispel something that people don't know is that you don't have to go all the way phase 1, phase 2, and then phase 3. You could, in theory, get a phase 3 award after day 1 of starting your phase 1 efforts as well. So phase 3s are basically applied at any time. You can presume if you find a NASA customer, another government customer who has project funds who's interested in it, that is something that can be done very rapidly rapidly shortly after a phase one. It's one of the benefits of it because by successfully winning a phase one, you've satisfied government competition requirements as well. Phase three rights, I won't go into all the little specifics of it, but I think one of the other speakers referenced the time eternal or something along those lines. But yeah, there's no time requirements as time can have passed and you can still be eligible for a phase three. You can get any number of phase threes. Phase threes have technically no dollar limit, which I'll talk about later as well. And phase three rights can pass if your firm becomes no longer a small business or becomes acquired, as long as it's still continuing that technology development, production, etc., related to the technology that was in the pipeline. Those rights can transfer. It might require novation, other things, but it can still apply. And we've had that happen. We have numerous small businesses be acquired. So while acquisitions or growing out of being a small business might render you ineligible for new phase ones and phase twos, it does not necessarily render you ineligible for the phase threes after the fact. I do want to talk briefly about the post-phase two opportunities. That's actually in the swim lane that I run within the program. These are designed to help the transitions because we recognize not everything advances on exactly this time schedule or this dollar schedule of our phase ones and phase twos. I come from an in-space chemical propulsion background, so I used to do a lot of rocket testing in big vacuum chambers and could burn these dollar values very rapidly, literally burn these dollar values very rapidly if we wanted to. So we have a number of mechanisms set up. Phase 2E is actually an option on existing phase 2 contracts. So all of our SBIR normal phase 2 contracts have the 2E option built into the contract. So this is a cost matching option to help transition to customers, investors, projects, programs, etc. It's a one-to-one match. So if you as a small business have a phase 2, from the halfway point on your contract to about 2 months before the end, you could apply for the 2E. You just have to get an outside investor, be it a NASA project, another government agency project, but it can't be SBIR money from NASA or another government agency. It has to be separate mission project program funding. It can be an outside company. It can be an individual investor. We've seen VC funds. There's a range. You can check out our website for all those rules and restrictions. Minimum of 25K, maximum of 375K. We match 1-to-1. We extend the phase 2 contract further to kind of help encourage that transition. Phase 2 sequential is an authority that we use in different mechanisms. I won't go into too much detail right now because this only happens at certain times. It's occasional. But I also want to talk about CCRPP briefly. So CCRPP is our Civilian Commercial Readiness Pilot Program. Our DoD compatriots got the Commercialization Readiness Program. We got the civilian and the pilot thrown in there. Not completely my acronym. It's a mouthful. But this is similar to 2E, and that's a cost matching mechanism. We do this once a year, and it's a highly competitive mechanism. These are the numbers from this past cycle where we were matching between $500,000 and $3 million. This may change for next year. Please check our website. We will update this later this summer or early fall, usually around the start of the fiscal year, to let people know when it'll be open and what the dollar value range is. We've matched up to $1 million, $2 million, and $3 million before, so it just depends on budgets for individual years. But for that one, the purpose is the near-term acceleration to commercialization and infusion opportunities. And there's more details on that in the specific call on the website of what we're looking for. But really, that is looking for not just technology maturation and continued maturation. That's really looking for accelerating the development to get it to that transition to, NASA infusion case, commercial case, all of the above. I do see one question that came in that I do want to kind of answer real quick because I just saw it happen to pop up. Is this funding available for our AFWERX phase 2, or do we have to stay with that program? So I will let people know that for the CCRPP, we did this past year. We may not do it in a future year, so check in future years. We did allow phase 2s from other government agencies within a certain period of time to apply for the NASA CCRPP such that it had demonstrated pertinence to NASA NASA goals and things, so you have to refer to the language. But we did allow for CCRPP these past 2 years for outside phase 2s to apply to our CCRPP. Subject to reauthorization, reapproval this summer. I can't necessarily speak to if that's coming again this year, but please check the rules for next year as well for when that comes up, because there is potentially a spin-in opportunity that we have done via CCRPP. Continuing a little bit on, I want to talk about our ARMD portfolio. Sorry, I threw out an acronym there. Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate portfolio. So NASA has 4 mission directorates: Human Exploration and Operation Mission Directorate, everything basically associated with astronauts. International Space Station, it was the Space Shuttle was underneath this. Science Mission Directorate, everything associated with Earth science, heliophysics, planetary science, astrophysics. So we're talking the Hubble Space Telescope, rovers, the rover on Mars, that all falls under the Science Mission Directorate. Space Technology Mission Directorate is our cross-cutting Space Technology Mission Directorate, where a lot of our cross-cutting technologies fall under. That one, I've done a number of work in my own past career for Space Technology Mission Directorate, working with new propulsion systems, because in some cases, you don't want to put your astronaut or your really expensive science instrument on a new rocket engine. So that develops a lot of the cross-cutting technologies that aren't necessarily in the HEOMD, the Human Exploration Bucket, or the Science Bucket. And then the fourth one is our Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate, which NASA was one of our main thrusts even before our foundation and still is to this day. So if you're looking in our phase 1 solicitation, you can see everything that starts with an A is one of our aeronautics subtopics. So I will say, though, and I'll reiterate this a couple times, please read our whole solicitation. There's a lot of cross-cutting stuff outside of just our aeronautics stuff, and we see a lot of cross-cutting cases come up too. But basically, our aeronautics solicitation follows our program structure. Advanced Air Vehicles Program, Integrated Aviation Systems Program, and the Airspace Operations and Safety Program, which I believe this community here would have interest in stuff that comes in all three of those areas. One thing I do want to echo is you can see here that this picture is from the NASA Aeronautics Strategic Implementation Plan. I encourage folks to go to nasa.gov and search for the Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate. You can also search for Advanced Air Mobility, ARMD, in NASA, and you can search specifically for the Strategic Implementation Plan. But I do want to quote out something from this that the Associate Administrator for ARMD did say. He said, basically, the ultimate goal for ARMD is the future air travel providing unprecedented mobility that will be safer, cleaner, and more efficient as it gets you to where you want to go faster than ever before. And for NASA's perspective, this includes many potential mission types and applications: passenger transport, aerial work, cargo transport, and a number of different aircraft types: manned, unmanned, conventional, short, vertical takeoff and landing, all electric, hybrid electric, etc. So NASA is really working with a number of people, a number of customers, the FAA, the DoD, to identify what the goals are in the community and put out a number of, at least in SBIR, a number of technology challenges and goals that we feel small businesses can address that will help this new way of operations. I won't go into all these statistics on the charts, but I just want to give you some idea of what things were like in the past. In recent years, ARMD has had around 16 subtopics, but I will say that within those subtopics, you'll see different scopes called out. Typically, in a given year, we averaged around 60 Phase 1 awards, and then slightly less than a 50% award ratio on Phase 2s. I borrowed these charts from a coworker of mine. If you do that mental division right there with the percentages, it was wrong. That's because not everyone who had a Phase 1 applied for a Phase 2. So it's correct based on the number of people who applied, but those numbers don't work out for yourself if you're doing the math, because I had to do a mental hip check on that as well. And then you can see that we've had a number of post-Phase 2 award mechanisms over time of a range of investments, including some very large numbers, which I'll talk about in a later slide. I won't go into all of these success stories in details, but I just kind of want to use these to highlight some of the advantages of the SBIR program and things that you can take advantage of, and just some cases for information of how firms and technologies have come through our pipeline. So one thing, the first one up on here, just to kind of emphasize the Phase 3 contract flexibilities and size. Like I said, Phase 3 contracts, you satisfied the competition by coming in through a Phase 1, and I believe this firm also went through a Phase 2. Again, not necessary. The X-57 contract, $20 million, I think greater than $20 million, was funded through a Phase 3, sole source, because they had come through our pipeline. Higher ground here, this was unmanned aerial systems operating beyond the visual line of sight. Like I said, we do a lot of cross-agency work in our ARMD portfolio, very much a lot of cross-agency work. I've seen everything from FAA, DHS, Forestry Service. We've seen a ton of things come through. They funded a Phase 3 on something that came out of our pipeline. MetroSim, similarly, unfortunately, the change slides icon is actually above my caption there. I think I see Navy and other ones listed there as well in terms of like groups of investors. That's one thing I meant to highlight on the previous slide that I forgot to cite, is for our 2E and our CCRPP, it doesn't just have to be one investor. It can be a group of investors. So we've seen that. We've seen NASA projects and programs partnering with the FAA, the DoD, and many others to all invest in a firm's 2E and the CCRPP. We've seen them up to like 10 or 11 different investors grouping in to help those firms either reach the minimum or get to the maximum. But from the investor's point of view, not only are we doing one-to-one match, which saves them half their costs, especially when everyone groups together. Now people are contributing relatively small amounts for a big impact. And the last one I want to cite here is the other reason I'd suggest folks that when you read our solicitation, read all of our subtopics, do keyword searches if you need to, but also don't just look at the aeronautics stuff, because even elsewhere in the SBIR portfolio, we've had thermal management technologies, battery technologies too, which I'll cite, numerous places within our portfolio that have had big impacts on electrified aircraft propulsion as well. So I actually took a look at this last year's solicitation just to refresh my own memory, and I don't actually know that we had battery content in this past year's solicitation, specifically in the Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate. It has been there before, but you'll see aeronautics technologies in a number of other subtopics, and there are definitely advantages that can be leveraged across that and infusion cases that can be leveraged. So just to highlight, I know I'm talking a bit long and I want to get to answer to some questions, but one thing I do want to mention is we also have the STTR program. So our STTR program is currently operated at the same time as our SBIR program. Small businesses partnered with research institutions to help transfer ideas and concepts. STTR for us has their own separate subtopics. We don't actually lump them in with SBIRs, so they are not necessarily tied to the mission directorates, although in many cases they are. But this is actually something driven by our chief technologists to identify fundamental areas that we want to transition. So I won't go into all the details here, but many of these have direct ties to specific mission directorates. You'll see things like space exploration plant growth for human exploration, but you'll also see things here that have cross-cutting applications like quantum comm. We've seen quantum comm in aero and on the space side. But then you'll definitely see things tied in here specifically for aerodynamics, aeronautics. So I encourage people not just to look at the not to look at our own aeronautics subtopics, but look across the board. This is just an example from this past year. One thing I always tell people, take a look at our solicitations from last year's and previous years. We roughly change about 50% of our subtopics every year. So if you do look at past ones for reference, it's a great reference. It's also interesting to see where NASA thinks the challenges are and where we want to go. But look back every year just to confirm if we did change it. But it's always good to look back in prior years. One thing I will mention while I'm here, and I don't want to undercut my own argument for telling people to take a look at everything so you don't miss something that's cross-cutting, but there are certain centers that have historically played a larger role in the Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate. So another thing you can do to take a look is not only NASA Glenn Research Center, which was Lewis Field way back when, and actually predated NASA. We were from the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics before NASA even existed. NASA Glenn, NASA Ames, which was actually Moffett Field, and also predated NASA, NASA Langley, and then Armstrong Flight Research Center, which used to be NASA Dryden. Those are the four centers that are predominantly focused with the Aero mission directorates. I'll have the contact information later on these slides and on our website for people at those different centers. So if you'd like to learn more, feel free to reach out to them. But I did want to mention that before I got. And I just mentioned what I was going to do. Here's the contact information for those four center POCs that you can reach out to if you want to learn more about what's going on at those individual centers. This is also available on our website, so you don't need to scribble this down rapidly right now at this moment. And I also have ARMD and STTR contacts. So our ARMD representatives and liaisons are Cheryl Quinn and Bruce Kogan, and our STTR program POC is Damian Taylor. So if you have any questions there, feel free to reach out to them. And again, this is also available on our website. So if you go to sbir.nasa.gov, under the red circle that I've drawn on here, contact us. You'll find a lot of those echoed again. Under solicitations, you can see all of our past solicitations. You can go all the way back and keep reading back. And if you want to have some idea of, if you go under schedule and awards, you can actually search our past awards portfolio as well. It's a pretty healthy search tool for just the NASA ones. SBIR.gov also has a search tool for all of NASA's awards. So I think I sped through that pretty good, and that should be the end of what I had to start with, but we can jump into some questions and comments.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Matt. The first question comes from the audience and is asked, is there an open SBIR topic?
We do not currently have an open SBIR topic. SBIR, sorry. We spell it out in NASA for some reason. We do not currently have an open topic. We do have varying degrees of specificity with our individual subtopics. So I would encourage people to take a look at different subtopics. Some subtopics are highly specific of what we're looking for with like very specific metrics of we need X, Y, and Z. Others are more written as we have this challenge in I think there was one from a couple years ago about crashworthiness, recognizing that you get into multi-rotor vehicles and the descent mechanisms aren't quite the same, shall we say, when failures happen. So broad crashworthy challenges. So not fully open, undefined, but we do have a range of specificity through open ideas.
Okay. And early you had mentioned that NASA only uses contracts for their SBIRs. Does NASA use or is contemplating use of other transaction authorities where you contract in a separate manner?
So for the SBIR program, we typically just use contracts. That is what we typically use, although we've had discussions on other things. Broadly within NASA, we do have other and I'm not necessarily from this side of the procurement world, so I can't speak to this in detail. NASA has, I think for us, our variant of that is what's known as the Space Act. So I'm not highly sharp on all that details on everything for Space Act. But if you search for NASA Space Act, you can find more information on that. I apologize, I'm less familiar with that side of the house. But we have a variant of something like that, what's called Space Act agreements.
Okay. A question from the crowd. Where can I read what proposals went through successfully? Are there any examples that you would recommend?
Yeah, so I definitely would encourage folks, you can look at if you go to sbir.nasa.gov, and I'm going to actually pull it up myself in the background. So if you hit the Schedule and Awards tab at the top of the page, there is an award search tool, and you can actually search through our past portfolio, pretty much all of it. Phase 1, Phase 2, a specific year. You can search by Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate if you'd like, and you can search through all those. You will not only find listings of abstracts. If you are looking to partner with firms, their contact information is all there as well. Those are just abstracts. We don't release proprietary proposals, but you can at least see the abstracts of what went through in a given year. And like I said, I encourage you to look back through a number of years and see kind of what went through. In terms of specific examples that I can recommend, I don't have any specific examples off the top of my head that I would recommend of any specific things. But one thing I can recommend is we do publish success stories. So again, on sbir.nasa.gov, there's a tab called Resources. One of the links within that is success stories. And we do publish periodic success stories, and we try to feature different technologies, different firms, also different stories and different life cycles, how different firms went through different processes to get their technologies from phase 1 to infusion to commercialization, who they worked with to get to that point, to try to feature a whole bunch of different cases. And more coming. We keep populating that all the time. And I will say under that resources tab, you'll also find things. The resource library has a number of links to past presentations, guides. There's webinars in there, event presentations. We held an event last year called the Innovation Opportunity Conference. You can see that under event presentations, where we actually did a number of guides and gave some inputs and advice, and you can go back and look at that. And then SBIR.gov, the SBA's website, also has a lot of good guidance, so I recommend them as well.
Okay. On the vein of resources, what do you find are the best resources for team matchmaking provided by NASA?
The best resources for team matchmaking provided by NASA. So there's a range of opportunities. So that's a good question. What is the best? One thing I would definitely encourage is attending NASA events. So I know that ARMD, I'm going to take a slight ARMD bent to this as well, because of the focus. If you search for the NASA Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate, on their website, they do have, and actually even more specific to this, I'm going to back up for a second, and my page just refreshed. If you search for NASA Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate, AAM, Advanced Air Mobility, they actually have links on there about joining working groups. So I would encourage that. I've not participated in those firsthand, but I know that ARMD itself advertises its events and its presentations, and I saw something on there about working groups as well. I know on our SBIR.gov website, .nasa.gov website, we also advertise a number of events. So we try to organize interfaces and chances to talk to folks and ask folk things as well. You can look in some of those as we post them that are upcoming. So I encourage that. I know we have a number of investors show up to those, a number of partners as well. So I would encourage that. And then I want to make folks aware that you can search our award search tool to find firms who might have a solution to a problem you have. And you can identify their contact information there. We're always encouraging folks to find out what's already in our portfolio to potentially partner and learn more.
So at this time, I'll also note that we have polls open. So if everybody could go take a look at polls, there's a poll that's germane to this discussion, and then we're also going to have our closing poll as well. So please take a look at those and respond to those as well. I'll ask a similar question that I've asked to all of the other SBIRSTTR reps, is if there is one piece of advice that you would give a SBIR team, what would that be?
Ooh, yeah. So I read everything. I heard what the other folks said, and I can't definitely contradict them. So I'm trying to come up with something that's on top of it. I would definitely encourage people to read the solicitation, read the subtopic. I would also encourage folks to read the references. And I'll refer to a couple things too, because our references, I think, provide a lot of context for what NASA is going to. We also have something called NASA Technology Report Server, the NTRS. A lot of our stuff is public. So if you search NASA NTRS, you can find basically our public documents all get posted there. So many of our solicitations, we ask that they put in references for people to read, but you can also search for things on NTRS as well to find what work we've done, program goals. I think background and context for me is important. I'd also, since I deal with transitions, also a way of identifying potential programs and other vested stakeholders within NASA to find out as you go forward who you might also want to talk to, what else is going on to help transition that technology, identify, concerns, considerations that they might need. All of our awards, because we do those in contracts, our phase ones have a technical monitor assigned, and our phase twos have a core contracting officers representative assigned. Definitely engage with them. And encourage them to, if there are other stakeholders and people within NASA, encourage them to invite them to kickoffs and meetings as well. If you're okay with other folks hearing about your technology. I know many of them, that we have a lot of people within NASA who love to hear about new technologies and things. So please encourage people to reach out and involve them, because I think awareness is one of those things that's always a challenge. Communication is always a challenge. So the more we can communicate, I think the better, the higher the likelihood things can transition well.
Yeah, information overload is a true thing, especially in these days.
Yeah.
One modification to the statement I made earlier: the poll, the final closing poll, is in the feed at the very top. So there's a poll that's germane to just this session, and then there's also a poll at the very top. I'll leave a final question because I think it's a pretty good one from the audience. Do you provide feedback on proposals that did not get selected?
Yes. So on both our phase ones and phase twos, we do provide feedback. And off the top of my head, please double check the solicitation. I apologize that I don't have the answer off the top of my head. One of them we send automatically, and one has to be requested. And just in general, I should put my normal caveat is check what it says next year as well. But currently, for one of the phases is automatic, and one has to be requested. So please double check when you're reading that to see if it is one of the ones that's automatic or how to request that feedback. If it is one where you have to request it, there's usually a time window as well to request it. So I encourage people to do that. I'm always glad to hear that. I always wanted the feedback when I submitted my proposals too. And just one other additional plug before I go, I had forgotten to mention, aside from just the SBIR program, if you search for NASA Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate solicitations, they have a whole separate page of their other solicitations, even beyond just the SBIR stuff. And you can also find, if you search for NASA NSPIRS, like Inspire, but without the I, NASA NSPIRS, and SAM.gov are other resources where you can search for other calls NASA has out there outside of the SBIR program, because I know many of you might be interested in just outside of our pipeline too. So I highly encourage folks to take a look at those as well.
Yep. And I'll add to that, for the academics in the audience, please take a look at the NASA University Leadership Initiative, or ULI. That's a great opportunity. It's extremely competitive, so build a strong team. And Dr. Deans, thank you so much. This was very enlightening, and hope to work with you in the future. And for everybody out in the audience, thanks for dialing in today. We hope you found use out of this and potentially found some new matches and identified some potential funding opportunities. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.